Let me ask you something that many parents don't say out loud. After your child receives their diagnosis, did you start replaying the past in your mind? Moments where you wondered, did I miss something? Should I have pushed sooner? Did I do something wrong? Maybe you went back through the doctor visits, school conversations, or little signs that just didn't make sense at all at the time. And suddenly you found yourself carrying a quiet weight that no one warned you about guilt. If you've ever felt that, this conversation is for you. Because one of the biggest things I wish someone would have talked to me about earlier is the guilt that many parents carry after a diagnosis. For many parents, the guilt doesn't come from other people. It comes from those questions we start asking ourselves. Questions like, did I notice the signs early enough? Should I have advocated sooner? Did I miss something important? And when we look back with hindsight, everything suddenly feels clearer than it actually was at the time. But hindsight can also create something very dangerous. It can create blame for things you didn't really fully understand at the time. And many parents, they end up holding themselves responsible for things that were never fully within their control. One thing that I've realized is that guilt often shows up because parents carry such a strong sense of responsibility for their child. When you love your child, you want to protect them. You want to do the right thing. You want to make the best decisions possible. And when life feels uncertain or complicated, that love can sometimes turn inward as pressure to do everything perfectly, pressure to fix things quickly, pressure to never make a mistake. But the truth is, no parent has perfect knowledge in every moment. Parenting has always involved learning as you go, and it doesn't suddenly change just because a diagnosis is made. Something else I wish I understood earlier is that knowledge doesn't always protect you from emotion. I work with children and families, and I understand how systems and services work. And even before that diagnosis, I had started noticing things. I was asking questions. I involved various service providers. I was trying to understand what was going on. But there were still moments where I felt like I should have pushed harder for answers, like maybe I wasn't being heard the way I hoped. And that's where some of the guilt started to show up. Because when it's your own child, even when you are doing the right things, you can still question yourself. You see, there's another kind of guilt that sometimes shows up quietly. It's the guilt parents feel when they're exhausted, when they need a break, when they feel overwhelmed by appointments and therapies and meetings and so many different responsibilities. Sometimes parents start believing they shouldn't really feel tired because they love their child. But caring for a child with additional needs requires emotional endurance. And no one can carry that perfectly every day. You are allowed to be human. Now, over time, I started realizing something important. The question that kept me stuck was, what did I do wrong? But the question that helped me move forward was different. What does my child need from me now? That small shift changes everything. It moves your focus away from blame and toward support, away from regret and toward action. And that's where real progress begins. One thing I've come to understand over time is that many parents they end up judging their past decisions with information that they didn't even have at the time. And when we look back, things can suddenly seem clearer than they actually were in those moments. And it is easy to forget that at the time we were making decisions while still trying to understand what was happening. There were questions we were still asking, there were things that we were still learning. And parenting, especially when you're navigating something complex, often means figuring things out in real time. That's something many parents experience, even if they don't always talk about it openly. Now, if you've been carrying guilt since your child's diagnosis, I want you to hear something clearly. You made decisions with the information you had at the time. You were asking questions. You were trying to understand what was happening. You were doing the best you could in moments that were often confusing and emotional. And the fact that you are still here, still learning, still advocating, still showing up for your child says far more about your love than guilt ever could. Parents' guilt may show up on this journey, but it doesn't have to define your story. Give yourself some compassion and grace, and the same that you give for your child. Because parenting through something complex doesn't require perfection, it requires commitment, patience, and heart. And if you're here, that already says a lot about who you are as a parent. This video is part of my Things I Wish I Knew series, where we talk honestly about the parts of this journey many parents experience, but they rarely discuss and they rarely hear it being discussed. Now, if this conversation resonated with you, let's stay connected. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.